Welcome, friends and fellow horse fiends. I'm Anna Fox of Equus Enlightened, and this is the Thinking Horseman Rider, the podcast dedicated to training you to become the best possible partner for your horse. Here, we explore the science and soul of horsemanship. We dive into equine behavior, the psychology of partnership, and compassionate training methods that help you become a thinking rider who creates a thinking horse. Because when you understand how your horse's mind works and show up with empathy and presence, everything gets easier and a whole lot more fun. My goal is to keep riding easy and fun for everyone, while helping you deepen your connection, find more flow, and maybe even create your own unicorn along the way. Whether you're working on dressage movements or just trying to understand why your horse did that thing they did, we'll explore the research, the real talk, and the small shifts that make a big difference in and out of the saddle. So grab your boots, take a deep breath. What are you waiting for? Come ride with me. Hey, horse fiends. Welcome back to another episode of Equus Enlightened with me, Anna Fox. And today it is cold and rainy in Virginia. It's a wonderful winter day here. So we're podcasting, and I really need to start with a confession, because as I was researching for this podcast, I went down a rabbit hole. And I really thought that I understood autonomy and what the definitions of it are. But what I found out is that, or at least my version of it, the one that I teach in my programs, the one I build my whole 7 seeds of partnership around, the one I've believed in for years because I've seen what it does to horses who finally get to feel like they have a say, and also to the riders who finally get to feel like they know that they can communicate with their horses. But in the process of going down this rabbit hole, I stumbled into a research study called The Complex Relationships Between Horse Welfare, Rider Safety, and Rider Satisfaction. Super sexy title, I know. But I didn't make up the title, so it's fine, right? And as I was reading it, I saw a line that said something about the rider controlling the horse. And I thought, oh, great, here we go. It's another article about how we can control the horse. But, plot twist, as I kept reading, I realized that the researcher's definition of control, and actually the scientific definition of control, was actually my definition of autonomy. And this is what I love, or don't love, about equestrian terms, horse world terms. And it's not just the horse world. There's other places too. But we have a lot of terms that I think we do not define first. And Alex Hormozi, who's this great entrepreneur, has a cool thing where he says, define a term to use a term. And this is so important with people, with your horses, whatever. And I believe Warwick Schiller has a version of that too, like create a cue before you use a cue, something like that, right? Same difference. But it's so important for us to define a term before we use a term, because we all have little variations in our definitions of words. For instance, and I'm not a super religious person, and if you are a super religious person and you find like fault with my Bible reference here or whatever, I'm sorry. But I had a discussion with a client of mine many years ago who studied the Bible extensively, and we were talking about this very topic, autonomy and control, and he said, it makes me think that where the Bible says we have dominion over the animals that dominion is not actually domination, and that's what I always thought it was. So in his mind, then, domination was, we have domination over the earth, humans, because we are the superior being. Don't get me started on that, okay? But that being said, it's the same concept with all of these terms. Leadership, oh my gosh, that is a huge one, drives me bonkers. And we could talk about that in another podcast, because I could probably do a whole episode on why I hate the term leadership around horses. We're talking about autonomy today. We're not talking about my hate for vocabulary. This is probably one of the reasons that I really love horses, because there's no vocabulary like this to deal with. No shifting interpretations of words, right? It's much more, they have a much more clean communication style. But as it happens, this study defined the riders having control as actually having autonomy, and the horses having autonomy. And it was basically my own definition, word for word, which was like, whoa, huge shock for me. I mean, I have a bachelor's in science. I like science. And sometimes, though, you're like, are they really studying the important things? But in this case, I think they were. So huge light bulb moment for me. And we're going to delve into that for this whole episode. Because I really thought, am I hallucinating here, or is science actually validating what I've been telling people? It's always a great feeling, right? And in this study, for sure, the word control did not mean domination. It did not mean micromanaging. It didn't mean cranking their head in and hyperflexing the neck and calling it safe. Didn't mean using a big gigantic bit or draw reins or something like that and calling it safe. It meant that predictability, clarity, and the ability for both the horse and the rider to influence what happens next creates a feeling of safety and confidence in both parties. It meant stability. It meant the opposite of helplessness for both parties. In other words, it was a form of supported autonomy, guided autonomy. And it's the exact thing that I teach in all of my sessions, from groundwork to in the saddle, clinics, lessons, what I teach in my online course. It's all about autonomy, because mammals of any sort thrive on autonomy. And the big thing in traditional training that no one wants to talk about is horses are not safer when we control them. When we teach them not to think for themselves, they are not safer. When they are taught that they can think for themselves, that they have influence, they are safer and they're smarter. Riders are not more confident when they dominate the horse, because there's always a fear of losing that. They're more confident when they have clear communication, when it's clear and predictable, because that is what creates a genuine partnership and genuine communication. So today, I'm really going to break this thing wide open, dig deep into what autonomy really is. You know that this is the part where your inner control freak panics. It's fine. It's fine. I help inner control freaks all the time. We'll make it through. Let's first start with, why is autonomy important? And what does it really mean? So autonomy is one of 3 core psychological needs for human well-being. And for what science has so far studied in animals, it seems like the same is true. Okay. So the other 2 core psychological needs for humans are competence and relatedness. Now, isn't that interesting? Because when you have autonomy, you feel competent. And when you feel competent, you can relate to your horse much better. So, autonomy, competency, and relatedness. I would say that these are also the 3 core psychological needs for riding. Think about this. Autonomy basically means the right of self-government, having agency over what you're doing. That's being able to choose certain things for yourself. And horses in the domestic world do not have a lot of that. So the more and more we take away, the more and more we're actually stressing them out. Because think about the last time you were micromanaged. For anybody who's ever had a job, sometimes even in school, if you have a boss or a teacher that seriously micromanages your every move, you get frustrated, you shut down, you just don't want to do it anymore. Why would horses be any different? And studies have also shown that people, when they are micromanaged, their anxiety goes through the roof. So, don't do that to your horse, because you're still doing it to yourself at the same time. You just don't realize that you're doing it to yourself, and then you're both anxious, and that's a bad combo. So we know from scientific research that mammals with choice have better emotional states. And I don't know how old you all are, but I'm old enough now to know that things have changed in zoos and mammal keeping, and even in horse keeping, we have learned so much about what is actually healthy for horses and what is not. In the domestic horse world, especially the competition world, I don't think a lot of the traditional horse keeping methods have changed yet, even though they should be. But as far as when we look at sort of wild animals that have been domesticated into zoos or like ocean parks, things like that, there's been a lot of research done and how they keep them and what they allow them to do. There's been big changes in the way that these places use enrichment to help animals. There have been studies in rats, primates, and dogs that also show a positive reaction to problem solving, which is a form of enrichment, autonomy, choice, things like that. So horses are not completely different from every other animal on the earth, and they're really not that different from us. There are things that are different, but in the overall spectrum of our wants, our needs, innermost desires, a lot of that's very similar. Autonomy also reduces the feeling of learned helplessness, which you might hear a lot of talk about shutdown horses lately. That's become a new buzzword. That's what that is. Shutdown is learned helplessness. We know that free choice movement and grazing stimulates natural coping mechanisms for horses. I'm having a hard time talking today. And actually reduces their reactivity. How many of you would love to reduce your horse's reactivity? So when you think your horse is being dramatic about a simple request, remember, they are a mammal that is wired to seek control over their body and their choices, just like you. So if you are keeping them from doing something they think is necessary, like running away, they're going to be reactive to that. And I can say from personal experience that horses who have the choice to come and go from shelter 24/7, eat when they want, I can 100% say that it has reduced reactivity in every horse that I have been around, that I've had in this situation. So I believe in that. Think about how everyone complains about COVID, right? And that could be your horse every day. Horses in a situation like I have, where they can come and go as they please, they have a lot of autonomy. And very rarely do we have any injuries. Very rarely is there any craziness, really no drama. So that to me is very interesting. But what would help us in our endeavors with horses? Being able to initiate, maintain, or stop a behavior with clarity. And by behavior, I mean like maintaining a gait. Can your horse trot along at the speed that you would like without you having to keep reminding them? That's autonomy. It should be one of the first things you instill. And I still hear so many instructors yelling, push, 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 more leg. Also, if your horse has the ability to make a decision in a time of safety. For instance, you're in a warm-up area at a show, and maybe you're a little distracted by something that's happening on the other side of the warm-up area. Maybe somebody's fallen off, or there's a horse that's just acting up a little bit, and you're sort of paying attention over there. In the meantime, another horse comes on the other side of you. Is your horse confident enough to be like, oh, I need to get out of the way here to save both your lives? Or is your horse like, oh my God, I have to wait for her to tell me, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble? And so they just kind of freeze. They don't do anything. You get run over. It's a bad scene. So you see how autonomy works both ways. It's not about the horse taking over. It's not about you taking over. It's about both of you working together. And that's what makes the horse feel like a participant in things that you're doing. And I believe the horses are funny creatures, and for whatever reason, they really put up with our shenanigans, and I think they sort of enjoy it at times. When we make it enjoyable, they're like, you people are crazy, but hey, it's fun to play with you. So when they feel like a participant, it makes it even better, and it also makes it even better for you. Because you feel like you are going somewhere with your friend, with your buddy, and you guys can do things. When I was horse showing my buddy Gus back here, it was always a vacation to go to horse shows because we had a routine and it was a partnership, right? We both made decisions and it was so easy. And people would always ask me, how did you teach your horse to do that? Or, oh my gosh, that horse is such a unicorn. He's always been a good horse. That's why I bought him, because I knew. I saw his brain when I went to see him. But he also initially was a little reactive, was a little shut down because of how he'd been started. So I had to create this unicorn. It wasn't like the gods shone down on him and made him an angel child. I don't think that happens. I have 2 kids and I can tell you, definitely no. Anyway, different story. But you can create your own unicorn with this theory. You just have to own it. Autonomy is not going to be chaos. It's not going to be letting the horse do whatever they want. It's not about you losing your leadership. Oh my God, that would be terrible. But I do have the final module in my online course is called Leadership and Flow. And if you've never checked out the Flow leadership style, you might want to do that. This is also not like Jesus take the wheel. All right, we're not taking our hands off the wheel and just praying it all goes okay. I see a lot of that. Like in the middle. People are micromanaging and they're like trying to get something done and then they're like, hopefully this works. Jesus take the wheel, and it doesn't. And then they don't know what to do. If they had the autonomy to make a decision on what they needed to do, and if the horse actually knew what Jesus take the wheel meant, things would go a lot easier. That's why this podcast is called The Thinking Horse and Rider, because I want you guys to think, and I want your horses to think. And I know that when you're up there, it's hard to think sometimes because you're trying to do so many things. But we can slow it down and we can teach you how to think. Hey, horse fiends, while I've got you, if this conversation is hitting home, my program, Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart, is exactly where you need to be. It's the place where any rider who feels unsupported, or a little too perfectionist, or maybe just unsure of where to go next, can finally get the tools, the support, and the confidence to understand their horse and themselves on a whole new level. You get immediate access to 8 modules at your own pace, live monthly Q&A calls, weekly office hours with me, and a community of riders just like you. So if you're ready to stop white-knuckling, wondering, or overthinking your rides and start building a real partnership with your horse, jump in now. Doors are open. I'd love to have you. And we have a special price going until the end of this year, until the end of 2025. So get in now. We can't wait to see you there. All right, so how do we actually teach autonomy? Especially when we live in this world of horses are always trying to hurt themselves, they're accident prone, whatever. Not true. It's because you haven't taught them to be autonomous. The first thing you need to do is start small. You don't chuck the reins at them at the canter and go, Jesus, take the wheel, right? That's not the way, especially if they've not been taught before. We forget how much micromanaging so many of our domestic horses are started with. If you're working with Mustangs or feral horses, that's a little bit different, where they already have a sense of autonomy. And I think this is where a lot of people get into trouble working with them, is because these horses already have a pretty strong sense of autonomy, and then you're trying to subject your dominance to them, and that doesn't work. But for the majority of us, especially here on the East Coast, where we have a lot of domestic horses, a lot of bred horses, and in the competition world for sure, thoroughbreds, they are handled from the time they're weaned. They're often started when they're a yearling. Most of our competition horses are started around 3, if not before. And when they're in those early stages of development, it's really like a child. We know for children, human children, that play and free movement is so important for their development. But what happens to these horses is that they're not allowed to be out in a space big enough to roam. They're also ridden in a way that micromanages them. So they don't have the experience. They learn that if they try to think for themselves, somebody is going to stop that thought process. And I can't tell you how many older horses with somewhat advanced level training I have gotten on and thought to myself, this horse doesn't know how to stand up on its own 4 feet without me holding on to it. That's not autonomy. So start small. Realize where your horse is, realize where you are, because a lot of times riders that have been taught to micromanage every step of the way with their horse, or just those of you who are serious control freaks, my perfectionists out there, I love you, but you are going to want to micromanage every step, and you're usually doing it with your little hands mostly. Yes. And I can't just chop those off, even though I'd like to. So, how do we start? I love to start on the ground. Teaching a horse to ground tie. Perfect example of autonomy. Allowing your horse to lead, or what I call leading from behind,
when you're letting them hand graze or even coming in from the field. Now, there are boundaries, right? They're not walking you, they're not pulling you. You are leading from behind or allowing them to lead you politely and show you what they want to do, right? I want to eat this grass or eat that grass or go sniff that thing over there. That is autonomy. Dragging you to the barn or to the field, that's not. That's different. Teaching your horse to put their foot up on something. One of the vet clinics that I used to use, they used to have this awesome program where they had the whole wellness thing for your horse. You had your shots a couple times a year, and then once a year you got front foot x-rays. I remember the front feet x-rays because my vet came out and she's all prepared. She's got her sedation and she's got her blocks. She also knows that my horse does not like this. Guess he does not do needles, not his favorite thing. And so she said, "Do we need to sedate him?" And I was like, "I don't think so. He'll put his foot up there and stand." And she's like, "That would be perfect if he would." So we put the wood block under him, stood there, radiographs, like easy peasy. And the tech was like, "Oh my God, I wish everybody did that." So these are things that also can help you, not just with your riding, but with other things that you have to do. I have been obsessed with, I think it's called Tanganyika. I don't know, it's a weird name. Wildlife Park. I think it's out in Kansas. And they have this baby pygmy hippo. I've been obsessed with watching these reels. So cute. They do a really good job of showing you how they teach these wild creatures to park themselves on things, target on things, and that makes their daily care easier and less stressful. It's called autonomy. Anyway, so if a pygmy hippo can do it, I think your horsey can figure it out. So ground tying, letting your horse show you where they want to go, that is a great one because so many times we have to get over our own want to micromanage. And that's going to be your biggest hurdle, not your horse learning autonomy. Your horse has the autonomy in there. He just needs to be reminded that he can do it or she can do it. And that will happen as you create some boundaries and also allow, right? But not micromanage. And then when you think about riding, one of the things that I do, we've done it on the podcast, it's in my course several times. I think everybody should do it every day when they get on. It should be the first thing you do, is your passive riding. Just wander around, see what's going on for the day. When you're wandering around and you're seeing what's happening for the day, notice where your horse wants to go, where they want to stop. Remember all that. And then can you ask your horse to stop? How much effort does that take? Can you just exhale and they'll stop? Or do you have to do multiple other things? Once you do that, will they stand there? Or do you have to micromanage them for them to stand there? When you say, "I'm ready to go again," will they go? Or do you have to do a lot of things to get them to go? That's all autonomous. So just start there. Notice those really basic things and then start to play, start to experiment with how you can make them better. I can give you all kinds of ideas on what you can do to make something better. But there's so much value in you actually performing the experiment and seeing what happens than somebody telling you how to do it, which is another problem with our traditional riding lessons. We get told how to do things all the time, and then we don't really learn how to do them. It's another reason why play is so important. When horses and humans feel autonomous, they become curious. They want to ask the questions. They want to do the things. They want to try. When they don't feel autonomous, they become defensive. And then they're just battling you all the time. Horses are curious by nature, just like little kids. When they're curious, their learning explodes. And for you people that have kids or teach kids riding lessons, you know that when they're really curious and they want to learn something, they will go to the ends of the earth to figure it out. Even if they don't like to read, they will find that thing in a book. They will do whatever it takes. But if you say, I need to sit down and read this book for 15 minutes, it's the end of the world, right? So, curiosity causes learning explosion. It does not cause bad behavior. When we don't set boundaries, it could, but that's a boundary problem, not a curiosity problem. When you have this learning explosion, when horses are like, yes, what can we learn next? What can I do? Then collection becomes easy because you're just asking them to do a series of things, and every time they figure one thing out, you're like, yes, you're the greatest horse ever. You got this. Now can we try this? Now can we try this? And they're like, oh, yes, I think I can. In fact, I was riding a horse yesterday who we've been doing a lot of retraining, the wonderful Namaste, who's been in many of my videos. And he has this misalignment thing. And we know it's there. He gets all the body work. He's had the vet checks, the osteopath, the whole thing. The key, though, is that we need to be able to maintain that in his body all of the time. And some of this is learned behavior and things that is from the past we're trying to change. And all the body work in the world is not going to teach him to maintain this feeling through his body on his own. Now it's up to me to help his owner do that for him. Show him that he can. He doesn't have to go back into this pattern. We don't want this pattern. We're not going to recreate this pattern. We don't want it. We don't like it. So it was really interesting because yesterday you really gave me a feeling of I can be mobile in my hips. I can move my hind end over. And before, it was really a block, from the withers back. It was like, it all goes together or it doesn't go, And I could feel him as I'm moving my seat around and I'm asking him with my leg, can you do this? And then him going, oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. And then once he figured out that that was the right answer and that was what I wanted, he was like, oh yeah, well, I can do that. Now, right now he can't maintain it for many steps, but he knows when I do this, I can do that. And so now I'm building it, right? Repetition then builds it, but he is autonomous in that he knows what this cue means, and he also is starting to figure out that this, being able to move his hip over and free his back up a little bit, is comfortable. It's easier. It's better than what he was doing before. So now the autonomy kicks in and he's like, ooh, he might be out in the field like, ooh, if I do that, does that, oh yeah, that makes that better. Oh, look at that. I don't know. Could be happening. I'm going to pretend that it is. And that's what I mean by autonomy makes learning so much easier. It also makes the hard things so much easier. Many of us, many riders that I help are trying to do so many things at once, and it's just not possible. Many of you know that my previous career was in 911 dispatching, which is totally not even what I went to school for. I studied sports medicine, which is why I nerd out on all this stuff about horses. But I did 911 because it was convenient for me to ride and show my horses. And we always say, what do you need to be a great 911 dispatcher? You need to be able to multitask. But multitasking in and of itself is not really a thing. What it is just your brain switching quickly from one thing to another. It's very fatiguing, actually. And so maybe I have a little bit of a jump start on my students, the people that I help, because my brain is already programmed to switch quickly between things. Maybe I was born with that. I don't know. Maybe I was born with that. Either way, you can train yourself to do this. Also, when you're teaching your horses autonomy, you don't have to switch. You don't have to do so many things at once because they are taking care of something else while you're doing something else. And you guys are, any great partnership. So don't try to do so many things at one time. Break it down. You learn a piece of the puzzle, your horse learns the piece of the puzzle, switch. And then put the puzzle pieces together. And that will make your riding so much easier. Remember, advanced work is just the basics, done better. And sort of stacking. So that leaves me with your rider experiment for the week. How are you going to start to build autonomy between you and your horse? We're going to go back to passive riding. Everybody's favorite thing. Passive riding is great because it keeps you from micromanaging. But I want you to go passive riding where you're comfortable. So if it's just walking around, cool. But now, this is sort of like passively active riding, I guess. You're passive unless your horse is not doing what you want. And you get to pick one thing. So for instance, if you are walking on a long rein, you're just feeling the vibe, getting in the groove, and you do that for 3 to 5 minutes. Let your horse go where they want, do the whole thing. Passive riding. And then pick one thing. Maybe they're sort of wandering and they want to check everything out. So you pick follow the rail. Or maybe they're a little pokey, or maybe they're a little energetic, and you pick maintain the walk at this tempo. One of the easiest ways to do this is to pick a number. Don't think dressage score number or whatever. Just pick a number, like 1 being super slow and 10 being super fast. And where do you want to be? So if you want to be at a 5, then cool. If your horse drops back to a 4 or a 3, you push them a little bit past. Go to a 6 or a 7 and then let them regulate back to the 5. You let them be there. If they lose that, if they drop you, up to the 6 or the 7 again and then back. Same thing is true if your horse goes too fast. Slow him down, leave him alone. Slow him down, leave him alone. And you may have to do this over and over again. The key is that you do not get frustrated, that you are patient, and that you are super clear, not muddled, with what tempo you want and how you're going to create it. The least amount of aids possible, right? Because we're teaching autonomy, we're not micromanaging. If, for instance, you want your horse to follow the rail and they're wandering, if they cut in 1 rein. So let's say you're going right, they cut in, a left rein brings them back to the rail, and doesn't matter if they're straight, that doesn't matter. All that matters is that they're following the rail, and then as soon as they get there, you let that rein go and you keep going. So you pick one task and you pick one way to fix it and see what happens. Happy riding.
All right, horse fiends, thanks for hanging out with us today. If this episode got your gears turning, don't forget to check out Reconnect, Rebuild, and Ride with Heart. The links are in the show notes. It's the program that'll take everything we talked about here and actually help you apply it in real life with your horse. And hey, before you ride off, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a quick rating or review of the show. It helps more riders like you find us and keep these conversations going. All the links you need are waiting in the show notes,